Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is Patrick Millikin from the Poison Pen Bookstore in Scottsdale, Arizona. And I've been looking forward to this event for a long time now. Two of my favorite writers, Scott Phillips and Eli Cranor, are with us today. And they're going to be talking about their respective new books, both of which are amazing. And Broiler is Eli's new book, and The Devil Raises His Own is Scott's new book. And well, welcome, gentlemen. It's great to see you both.
Thanks for
Yeah,
having me.
nice to
Yeah.
see you.
And it's funny, the last time Eli and I had a chat like this, we talked about our mutual love for Charles Portis. And
Oh, yeah.
I suspect Scott's in on the same page too.
I'd just been rereading The Dog of the South, as a matter of fact, which I picked up. I picked up a copy. Oh, I don't know. Shit. Doesn't matter
Yeah.
where I picked it up, but it's just
Yeah.
stuff is so great.
Yeah.
One of the
Yeah.
few writers I reread.
Yeah. All of them. All of them. And the Dog of the
Everyone.
South up there. Yeah.
So as I was saying before we got started, there's so much to get into with both of these books. I could easily do two full programs. Uh, but so I'll try to do my best to go back and forth between the two. As I said, they're both really remarkable books. Let's start with you, Eli, and tell me a little bit about with all three of your books, they're obviously very personal stories on all sorts of different levels. This new book, Broiler, maybe we could start by having you talk a little bit about the just the dedication, which
Yeah.
really gets into it all, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. So the dedication is for mom and every mom out there. Um, and then for the two we lost between Emmy and Finn, and then for my first block students who couldn't stay awake, now I know why. So really, you're right. I mean, those three dedications encapsulate the whole book. And yeah, my first three novels have been extremely personal. like they're like each one is their own pound of flesh. And so this one even more so, even though looking at it from an outside perspective, it might not seem that way because the broiler at its core is about motherhood and immigrant workers in chicken processing plants. So like when you look at this dude, on the video, you think motherhood and immigrant workers, like, yeah, real personal for that guy. But the story came to me because I was teaching in an alternative learning school. I had a back table of kids who couldn't stay awake for anything. They'd sleep till noon every day. And come to find out they were working these horrible night shifts at the local chicken processing plant. And so I started talking to, this was before I ever had a book published. I was writing, but and I just started kind of taking notes, because you can't go in one of those places. There's no way to do like investigative. I mean, Alice Driver is an Arkansas writer who's got a book coming out called The Life and Death of the American Worker that's like a deep dive into this stuff. And she couldn't, even get into a plant. So I was really lucky to have that kind of primary source. And then all the stuff with motherhood and miscarriage. I mean, it's become as I've talked about this book. I mean, you can read it and you can see, I wrote this book when our son, my second born, was about 6 months old, about as old as the boy in the book. And we had come through all that. And there was something about that desperation of having lived it that kind of tied it back to the chicken plant, which is a strange thing. But in my mind, that was finally the thing that made me feel like, okay, you can write about this processing line and these it gave me enough confidence to try and bridge that gap.
So the novel really centers around two kind of parallel families, you know, and can you maybe break down who they are? We have Gabriella Menchaca. Is that how you say her
Yeah.
last name, Menchaca?
Yeah.
And then her fiance, I guess you'd say, Edwin Salcedo.
Yeah. So you've got Gabby and Edwin, and they're both line workers. Younger couple, been out of high school about 7 years. And then you've got Luke and Mimi Jackson. Luke is the plant manager, so he runs the plant. Mimi is his wife, a stay-at-home mom, and they have a 6-month-old son named Tuck. And without spoiling anything, and Patrick, I don't care how, I mean, if we want to spoil stuff, we can, if we want to talk about it. But long story short, the whole book is about the American dream. There's a line in the penultimate chapter that says, for every American dream, there is a corresponding nightmare. And it took me like 80,000 words to pare the book down to that like how much is enough and what is the cost of more. And so the real point of the plot is that Luke keeps going for more, and at the start he keeps trying to up the production on this line, and it causes a cracking point between those four families, or those two families of four characters.
Yeah, I mean, we can get into the details of it in a little bit, but I'm assuming this is will you be assassinated if we say that this is really Tyson?
No, no, and I mean, this is how dumb this shit is, dude. Like, I do, because I have a lot of football background stuff, and so when I had the books starting to come out, I got asked by this statewide radio show that's like our sports talk radio for all of Arkansas to come on and recommend a book every Tuesday, which has just been I mean, I'm thankful they let me do it, but it's also been very tough to talk books with these old, yeah, which I know all about because I was the quarterback, reading a book in the back of the bus. And anyway, I mean, 2 months before this book came out, our University of Arkansas was looking for a new basketball coach. And we ended up hiring John Calipari from Kentucky, which was a huge get for us. But the reason we got him, anybody want to guess why we got Coach Cal, this big coach? Because Tyson paid like $50 million on the side of his, contract. And so everybody on the sports show is calling in like a couple months before my book comes out, and they're like, just want to thank Mr. Tyson. And I'm like, it's the worst time ever for this book came out. But yeah.
Wow.
Well, at least it wasn't the Waltons.
or in Wichita, the Koch brothers.
The Koch brothers, yeah.
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 For sure. So these chicken plants, I understand they're kind of ubiquitous in northern Arkansas. Is that right? That region?
Yeah, and I mean they're all across Arkansas, really, man. I mean, and I've told this story, and I grew up in eastern Arkansas, so right outside of Memphis in a little town called Forest City. I was born there, lived there till I was 5. It's where all my family is. And anyway, I'd be driving around with my grandpa, and chicken houses, which are different than the processing plants. The houses where they grow the chickens, I mean, they smell horrible. Plants smell horrible too, but you drive by a chicken house, you can smell it from 100, 200 yards away. And I remember driving around my grandpa and being like, oh, Pop, what's that smell? Oh, it smells horrible. And I said, what is that? And he'd go like, smells like money. I'll never forget him saying it smells like money. So yeah, they're all across.
Right. To kind of switch gears a little bit, although I was trying to think of a good segue between your two worlds, and there definitely are a number of them. Eli was just talking.
Patrick, Soho. We got to give our Soho shout
out.
That's
right. True. Yeah, we're both published by Soho.
Yeah.
Soho Press, and Juliet Grames was just here over the past weekend, and everybody was saying, what a remarkable thing that they've done with Soho, really kind of revisioning, and the stuff they're publishing is just incredible. The variety and the ambition, really cool stuff. But I was thinking about, you were talking about, for every American dream, there's a corresponding nightmare, I think was what you said. And what a perfect metaphor to talk about, early Los Angeles, 1916 LA in particular, which is where Scott's book takes place, just on the verge of U.S. involvement in World War I, which we can get into. But yeah, I mean, so much of noir and hard-boiled history as we read it, and Chandler and all those. It's all about, this sort of facade of Los Angeles, the kind of classic thousands and thousands of young girls from all over America showing up at Hollywood and Vine with a suitcase, hoping to get into be a film star. And doesn't always work out that way, does it? Or
Mm,
no.
no.
Tell us a little bit about your new book, Scott, and it relates to a large overarching story that you've been writing since pretty much since day one, correct?
Yeah, well, these characters are kind of all, a lot of them are interrelated. There's a big reveal in this book about, as they say, reveal, that's a Hollywood word, and I hate it, but there's a revelation, let's say, in this book about the true parentage of, the true lineage of Charlie Arglist, the main character of my first book. So these characters are all now officially related. There you go, the ice harvest. Um, so these characters are all now officially related by blood. Um, but yeah, I had wanted to write a book about early Hollywood for a long time. I've always been interested in silent films, and always, I have a dirty mind, and I have always been interested in pornography and the history and the making of it, and how the lengths people will go to create, distribute, and procure it. And I wanted to show what happened to Bill Ogden, who was a character from Cottonwood, which was my third book. He's a photographer, and that book starts in the 1870s. And I knew he ended up in California because there's an epilogue in that book that's set in the 1930s. So I thought, well, where is he around World War One? And I know he's living in the 30s with his granddaughter and her husband and children, and just kind of thought, well, here's a way to. But it took me years to figure out that was what the whole book was going to be.
And then with the walkaway excuse me, Cottonwood, that's the Bloody Benders book, right?
That's the Bloody Benders, yeah.
Yeah.
A
For
real family of.
yeah, for the people watching, and it's great to see Soho bringing those books back into print too. You
Yes,
know,
that's another great thing about Soho. They really, they're thorough.
so Cottonwood, and then just for the people watching who might not be familiar with that Bloody Benders, can you just give us a brief thing,
Well,
description?
they were a family. Well, they probably weren't a family. They were a quartet. An older man, an older woman, a younger man, a younger woman. Three of them appeared to be German. They had German accents, and everybody said. And then there was one. One of them was a younger woman who did not speak with an accent. And they had a little house on the prairie. In fact, Pa Ingalls, or Mary Ingalls Wilder, wrote about the Bloody Benders, not in the books, but in a memoir she wrote. And anyway, the Bloody Benders, they had a house out on the prairie, and they made it known that travelers could spend the night. Travelers between, Fort Scott, say, and Coffeyville, Kansas. And what would happen is if they thought someone had money, and if they thought someone, couldn't be traced, they would make the person disappear, and they would end up in the orchard. Now, it was a lot bloodier than that. It involved hammers and knives and bloodletting into a dirt cellar, but they killed a lot of people. And they were eventually caught. And I'd been fascinated by this story since I was a child. And when I was 5 years old, the state of Kansas gave out these little red ring binder books. Um, and one of the pages in it was a picture of the Bloody Bender's house, and it said these people are digging up a graveyard in the backyard of this, in the orchard of this little house, and talked about how they would hit them on the head with a hammer and then slit their throat and bleed them into the cellar, and I was 5 years old when I got this book.
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, it's strange.
Not exactly Tom Bodette, were they?
No, no, and but obviously it stuck with me. So there you go. That's how that book got written, and that was
And
Phil Ogden's first appearance.
right, and then you had Hop Alley, right?
Right.
Doesn't Bill appear in Hop Alley too? I'm trying
Bill
to.
is the narrator and main character of Hop Alley. Hop Alley was originally going to be the middle part of Cottonwood, and the book was getting too long, and so it was decided that I would allow about a 20-year gap between part one and part two, and I still had this little core. And a few years later, a wonderful editor named Court McNeil said, "Hey, I'm thinking about putting together publishing some novellas, Western novellas." And so I sent him, what I had, and he said, "I don't think this is a novella. I think you should expand this into novel length and give it to your usual publisher." So that was how that happened.
And yeah,
But
Eli, I think
you could read the first half of Cottonwood, then read Hop Alley, then read the second half of Cottonwood, and it would all make perfect sense.
yeah, if memory serves, it deals with some of the anti-Chinese
Yeah,
sentiment and some of the riots that took place in the
right, in Denver.
Denver.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So we get to Los Angeles here in 1916, and uh, there are some spoilers here, but um, talk a little bit about, and then we'll head over to Eli again. Um, a little bit about what was going on in terms of it's the rise of Hollywood, obviously the silent film era is in full swing.
Yeah.
And then kind of on the side of that, people are utilizing this new technology, the motion picture camera to get into the porno industry. How did
Yeah.
those two kind of develop side by side?
Well, you have anytime you have a new medium, people use it for porn. That's a commonplace notion. But what you had in Hollywood was a complicated new medium technically. So you had to, you had to be pretty good. It's like the early days of still photography. In 1870, you had to be a really good technician just to take a picture of a tree. And the same thing was true in 1916 about making a movie. You didn't just turn the thing on. There was a lot to know. And so, but there were these technicians and there were labs and there were places to get film and stock and you might look around and say, "Hey, you want to come and shoot a movie? It's a special kind of movie." And then, if you could cut film for a Keystone, you could also cut one for a dirty movie. And so it's kind of an underground economy, I think. I really don't, there's obviously these people didn't leave behind written records, but there are suppositions to be made, I think, about um, how these things got done. I mean, obviously the same people and if you see these movies, they're just as dirty as anything made today. They're filthy. And some of them are technically okay. But these are, I guarantee, people who were working legitimate film jobs at other times. So,
Scott wanted to say something. I was watching something the other day on the internet. It relates to the power of the camera. And then there's something about what I'm going to tell you that just felt so pornographic, and yet it had nothing to do with pornography. But here was what I saw. This guy's doing push-ups, and he's on the ground, and he's got his phone, like propped up, so he's filming himself doing push-ups.
yeah.
And he's got these two 45-pound free weights on his back, like balanced on his back.
Mhm.
Does that make sense? You know what I'm talking about? Like the
Yeah,
big,
sure.
big
Yeah.
plates. He's
Yeah.
got them. So it's weighted push-ups, and he's looking up at the camera. And as he does, one slides off and it hits his hand. And he jumps up and he's looking at it and he's like screaming. And then he like takes, you know, the time to put his hand in front of the camera, and like this one finger is just completely, you know, cooking. And the reason it felt so pornographic is because it was like such an immediate awareness of the camera. You know, like
Yeah.
this dude has just broken his finger horribly, and instead of like running to go, like he takes the time to show like,
Yeah. Yeah.
look, you
The
know,
money shot. It's the
yeah,
money shot.
that was
Yeah.
it. That was it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, one could point to a recent assassination attempt, but maybe I shouldn't get into that.
Probably best.
Probably best for our audience here. But Eli, I was looking at what some of the reviewers were saying about your book, and I came across what I thought was a really great insight where some random person on Goodreads wrote, and he's talking about, of course, we're drawn to obviously these parallel couples, and we can get into asking a little bit about if you had that parallel structure from the very beginning, how you chose to tell this story, which we can get into. But anyway, the quote is, let's see, this is also the point where Cranor does an excellent job of developing the characters and showing how alike Luke and Edwin are, and the similarities between Gabriella and Mimi. It's this action that drives the rest of the novel. And then he says, I don't know if you agree with this, but Luke and Edwin are the type of fuck-ups who don't or can't see that they are fuck-ups. They're men of conviction, but they cannot or will not process why they have those convictions, nor do they take the time to think about how their actions affect those around them, especially the women they profess to love and respect. I'm like, wow, this person
This is
gets
just some rando on Goodreads or something.
just
This
some
is
rando. And I thought it was maybe someone from the Soho community. No, but I was like, wow, that's really insightful comment.
oh wow. That is a really good comment. Like that they can't see what it is that they're actually doing. And I think, yeah, I mean, of course, I think that blindness is important, especially in a crime novel, right? Like um reflection is not is not really, you know, a good motive for any, or a good move for any of my characters. But no, man, I don't know. I don't know. The thing about this book for me and those four characters, and it always, I guess it did start with those four. I knew what I wanted to happen, you know, like I knew how what I wanted to happen in that like inciting event, but I didn't guess I knew I had all four of them like right off the bat. They just each kind of kept popping in, and I don't outline or anything. I do I'll take a bunch of notes, you know, like I have a big board, and I do all that stuff, but I try not to get sequential. Um so yeah, man, I don't know. I think I'm still just kind of reeling from this amazing Goodreads review from
Yeah,
do you
no,
know
it was real
you
good.
know who did this, Patrick? Or is this a setup? Did you
It,
write this, Patrick? And you're just fucking with
well,
me?
no,
No?
I can't take credit for it. I would love to. It's a great line, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd have
Sometimes,
to go over and
sometimes a
find.
reader or a critic will encapsulate something that you don't quite realize you did, but you're like, yeah, I think that's right.
Did
Well,
that.
and we all bring ourselves to the
Yeah.
book, So, um, yeah, boy, there's so much I want to ask you about. I mean, in many ways, it struck me as kind of a classic labor novel,
Yeah.
and I was wondering if there were some, of course, people are going to compare it to or bring up The Jungle, or, maybe Zola. I was thinking of Germinal, which is a great book, or, but we're really given a kind of a view into these almost Dickensian conditions inside the chicken plant, and that these, the undocumented workers obviously are exploited and horribly manipulated by, in this case, Luke, and the power structure there at Tyson Detmer, excuse me. Um, but some of the details and this won't be too much of a spoiler because you say it right away. Tell us a little bit about the diapers.
Yeah. So it's the diaper opens up second scene of the first chapter, and it's just that the workers, again, the rate at which they're making, and the rates are all real. So there's different laws per county in Arkansas about how many chickens you can process per minute. And the rate that I gave Luke's plant is the highest that's allowed by law in Arkansas. And because of that, in the novel, the workers are having to miss bathroom breaks. Like, and it's not that they don't have a structure built in for it. They do have an alternate, but the alternate's not always playing by the rules, you know, for different reasons, or it's not always readily available. And when they're not available, these workers have taken to just wearing diapers. And so, yeah, that it was a good, I don't know, somebody else, this is another thing somebody else found that I thought was good is Luke wears this, the plant manager, Luke, he wears this really specific kind of very fancy underwear called Saks. And I loved that this reader dug out of there that there was this nice parallel between this adult diaper and this fancy $75 pair of, you know, Saks underwear. I don't know what the big metaphor is there necessarily. I thought it was a good parallel.
Right. Right. And tell us a little bit about, you know, as you're writing the book, did you feel a certain amount of sympathy to all four of them in
I
different
tried.
ways? Because
Yeah,
there's a lot of compassion, and one of the things I admired is they're not shown as these kind of black and white characters. You know, they have
yeah.
their flaws.
I try to do that, man, like with everything. I mean, that's something for all my books that I've tried really hard. I think everybody from Tarantino to Dostoevsky said something about, you know, that that even the bad guys or the good guys of their own stories or whatever. So yeah, I mean, Luke Jackson, if you look at him and look at me, in a lot of ways, he should have been the easiest character to write. We're both white dudes from Arkansas. Um, but in a lot of ways, he plays the bad guy. And so having to do that, you know, and dig in. So I don't know. These characters, and there was I was so thankful. Daniel Woodrell read and blurbed this book early, and he had this great blurb about how it is the characters that make this book. And I thought, I love hearing this Upton Sinclair stuff. I'm from Arkansas, born and bred. All my three novels have been set in Arkansas. There's so much, like Scott was talking about, and I believe too. I mean, I've lived in South Florida, I've lived in Sweden. We've come home to Arkansas. Like, there's nowhere else I want to be yet. There is so much shit that I would like to see changed. You know, like there's so much shit that I would like to. So if my books can do that, I'm happy for it. But I don't think they're going to do that by me preaching in a book.
Sure.
They're not going to do that by me just listing a bunch of horrible facts and making this cardboard shit, you know, where it's all easily. So when Woodrell, to tie this back to he said it's the characters, it's their lives and shitty jobs. And I can't remember what he said something, you know, about how it was those four characters for him. And he even said like Steinbeckian. And I thought, whoa, you know, but I was so pleased because I think showing people all four of those different characters who can fit a lot of different people, at least here where I live, for them to see themselves in those four characters, and then maybe they can really feel for it, you know, and really that's how you get people to change, you know, that show them a mirror.
That's interesting what you were saying about, you know, just almost gratuitously piling on all these details that are meant to horrify the reader.
We called
Rather
it
than,
porn. While me and Juliet were editing, she would leave a note on in the margins and say more chicken porn. So
chicken porn. Yeah,
I'd have to
right.
dig deeper, you know, I'd have to go deeper into the research for chicken porn.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I was thinking a little bit about, you know, the sort of I learned this by reading Don Winslow, is just, you know, the rise of the maquiladora situation, you know,
Yeah.
and when we're talking about Gabriella and Edwin, um, you know, I think the way he kind of broke it down for knuckleheads like me, kind of how the cartels sort of rose into prominence. And part of what he emphasized was that the maquiladoras, all of a sudden it was mostly women, not exclusively, but mostly women who were suddenly had all these jobs. And, the men were all, in that kind of muy machismo sort of culture. They were kind of, you know, just widespread apathy. And I thought that was a really interesting kind of connection to make.
That is
Um,
a great connection, man. Because yeah, the stars of the show, in my book at least, end up being Gabby and Mimi. And like I
yeah.
said, I wrote this book 6 months after my son was born, in the fog of new parenthood and the sleepless nights, and also still sitting back and watching, having just watched what all my wife had done, and like if there isn't a time in your life as a man to feel like, holy shit, like, these creatures they are superhuman, and so I think I was really trying to channel that in this book, just kind of this new awe I had for this woman, um, who I'd known and married and all this stuff, but like just watched completely metamorphosize into something that was beyond what I could have ever imagined.
Yeah. Well, this guy with the Goodreads, he goes on to say,
Who is this guy?
I don't know. I'm just going to steal his stuff, though. I hope he sees this, that we're giving him tribute. And I shouldn't say him. I thought it was a he, but it might well be a woman. I don't know. Um, but he says, yeah, Mimi and Gabrielle are left to clean up the messes their significant others create. Uh, yeah. So, and then I'll jump back to you, Scott. But can you tell us a little bit? How about how does this turn into a crime novel? Where does the plot kick in?
I have no idea.
No, I was asking, hold on, I was asking
Wait.
Eli just
Oh,
for him,
sorry. I
and
was
then I'll
gonna
jump to you.
wait. Yeah, I was gonna say, wait. What's
Okay, so where it turns into a crime novel, and I'll give a hint. As I've been out on the road for this book, a lot of people have drawn comparisons to Raising Arizona. Um, And I even had another, probably the same dude who wrote that Goodreads review. He said, "Well, yeah, I always thought it was kind of Raising Arkansas, but a little, but with not quite as the same sort of humor, or not the same sort
Mm,
of." So
hmm.
yeah, they converge. Edwin gets pushed past his limit, like we said, because of the pressures in the plant, and then he decides to set up a ransom type situation, which of course goes horribly wrong.
Right. Okay, absolutely. Scott, sorry. Switch over to you for a few minutes here, and we'll talk about. I
sorry,
love the.
I did think you had asked me that question, and I was like, wow, I don't know when it turns into a crime novel.
Right. Um, well, it turns into it on page one when
That's
Flavia,
true.
yeah,
That is true.
Flavia, his granddaughter, Bill Ogden's granddaughter, has a very auspicious kind of opening chapter.
That's a
And
true story, by the way. That I have a police transcript from 1920, and this guy came home, and he had been drinking, and he had an argument with his wife. He went to the drawer and pulled out a gun, and she beat him to death with I believe it was a skillet, but might have been a baseball bat.
is that right?
It is a true story, and I even used the name of the real assistant district attorney for Wichita at that time. But that was also it happens above a movie theater where I used to work, and the man's blood drips down into the projection booth and hits the projectionist on the head. And I used to be the projectionist at that theater, built in
Okay.
1906. The Marple Theater, if any Marple people are out there watching this right now, is shout out to the old Marple crew.
Is it still standing?
It is still standing. It's a bar now,
Okay.
but yeah, I can show you where there's a hole in the pressed tin ceiling from a champagne bottle in 1978.
Is that right? Wow.
Yes. But
Um,
yeah, so she ends up having to leave Wichita because it's just not good for the local Latin and Greek teacher at the high school to have murdered her husband. So
so you have these various people kind of, not just her, but several other people converging on Hollywood at the same time.
right.
Uh, it's a great cast of, I just want to make sure I have the names right. Um, yeah, Henry Seegers. Is that how you say it? Or Sagers?
I say Sagers, but
Sagers.
yeah. His Henry's son is a character. Henry and Flavia's son is an important character in Left Turn at Albuquerque. So that's where that comes from.
Tell us about who is Henry?
Henry is a kid from West Virginia who doesn't want to work in the mines, and he's sharp, and he figures he can do a lot of different things. He wants to go whether the weather's good. He doesn't have any interest in the movies or photography really, but he hears Los Angeles is nice, and it's as far as away from West Virginia as you can get. So he hops a train and gets a job in a photo studio. Makes a new friend on the train or on top of the train. They ride their my grandfather and his brothers and his dad used to ride the freights to the wheat harvests up in Canada. They would do because it was later in Canada than it was in Oklahoma. So they do the Oklahoma and then they'd wait a few weeks and they'd ride the rails. But my grandfather told me, no, we never went in the freight cars. You get in a lot of trouble doing that. We would ride on top of the trains. So that's what Henry and his new pal Ezra do, and they separate when they get to Los Angeles, and with some, there are incidents. But Henry gets a job in a photographic studio, and he meets Flavia, the widowed murderess and granddaughter of Bill Ogden.
A Mrs. Robinson kind of character in the story.
Well, sort of a little bit. She's not that much older than him, though. She's been married. She's probably 5 years older than him, but she's been married, has murdered her husband, and is now a widow. So,
Much
it's
more experienced.
a little more experienced. Yeah,
Yeah.
different kinds of experience.
And then you've got this, who's one of my favorite characters in the book is this is Trudy, who we
Yeah.
we learn, a little bit more about who she's married to
hmm
as the book goes on. Tell us about her.
Well, Trudy, I don't even know where Trudy came from. Trudy was just, she is a woman who's been abandoned by her worthless husband with two small children. And she has been desperate to make any kind of living. And at a certain point, even though she is relatively sexually inexperienced, having only ever slept with her no good deadbeat husband, she does a little street walking. And it's a terrible experience for her, is for anybody, I think. But she ends up getting an offer to work in a blue movie, and she ends up meeting all these different people. And originally, I wasn't, she was going to be just kind of a walk-on. She was just going to be, well, I'm talking about the shooting of this blue movie in 1917, this silent blue movie, and I have these two actresses, and I thought, well, it'd be interesting if one of them is just kind of indifferent, and that's okay, I'll do anything, and the other one is kind of repulsed by the whole thing. And that was Trudy and Victoria. And um, they started taking on a life of their own, and I started getting more and more interested in them. And I really did not think that they were going to be, characters throughout the book. But by God, they kind of were. I think they're kind of at least Trudy is kind of the heart of the book.
Yeah, definitely. And then you've also got uh, George Buntnagel. Well, that's a great name.
George
And
Bush.
his wife Irene.
Irene, yeah. And they're a what they used to call a lavender marriage. He's gay, she's lesbian. They're the best of friends, and in a way, it is a marriage. There's no sex at all. They are both exclusively interested in other partners. And they get involved in this blue movie thing just sort of by accident, and they think, wouldn't it be fun? Because they're sort of, they're not rich, but they're better off than most of the characters in this book. And they say, wouldn't it be fun if we made a really good porno movie? And so they get involved with this guy who's making these kind of sleazy things that Trudy and Victoria are appearing in. And it becomes a success, and they start making some money. And
Right. And
yeah,
just briefly, the style of the book, the tone, the whole tone that you adopt in the book, um, I could, that of course is the whole era of that, William Hearst style
right.
journalism, and the book kind of has that flavor. Some of the language does, and you intersperse some, stories, news stories, and the way
Mhm.
it's cut, these very quick cuts. Can you
Mhm.
talk a little bit about that? The style.
Oh, well, I think the fact and people have made a lot about the fact that I do these very short scenes and I cut between them, and there's this Griffith thing, and I don't disagree with that, but it was not something I really thought about. It was just that's just kind of uh, my attention span, I think. I like writing really short scenes. I like reading really short scenes.
Yeah.
And but David Kippen, in a really interesting review of the book, talked about how, toward the end, a lot of the storylines start to come together, and it's a lot, and he says, then that must have been how life, I'm not doing it justice, but that must have been how things felt when things were going from the very rural and the very provincial to the very urban and very fast moving and very modern things. And that was something I was trying to get at, because it's about the period when LA was, kind of a cow town almost, and turning into this, sort of halfway between the cow town that it was and the megalopolis that it is today, and how confusing that was for people.
Bink says, I will not be resisted. There she is. Yeah, well, I mean, how about your research? Obviously, you said you'd been planning to do this book for a long time.
Yeah.
Uh, getting, what was some of your research like? Were there books that helped or?
Oh, well, a lot of books, and I've been collecting books on silent film since I was a teenager. So, and I have a good friend who's a silent film historian,
uh,
and I've been reading up about it for years. But so I would go back to Kevin Brownlow or something, and that was for film, but for LA, what I found very useful, Ace Atkins sent me a commercial directory from LA from the teens. And online, I found a terrific PDF, full color, of the official 1915 LA City directory, which is just, I mean, I could just read it for pleasure. I mean, it's thousands of pages, and it's just, who lived where and what's a good fireproof hotel. And, when I was trying to figure out, well, when this old lady gets knocked over by the drunken silent film actor, what hospital do they take her to?
hmm.
So that kind of thing. Also, just the daily papers. I mean, I can't resist writing old newspaper articles for these books, because I just love the way they sound. And the LA Herald Examiner is all online. Every day was ever published, and by God, it's just a treasure. And if you want to find out, what you look at the want ads, you want to find out what a job paid, or what something cost, or what people were talking about in terms of just the equivalent of talking about Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce, those sorts of things. What were people talking about just when they were shooting the shit at the diner?
Right. And it's interesting reading some of the crime stuff that came out a little bit later, like the
Mhm.
James M. Cain, that was a little bit after. Reading Mildred Pierce,
Mhm.
some of those books about early Los Angeles. There's a lot you can kind of pick up. I remember when I was a kid watching all those the early Dragnet episodes. I realized this is a much
The
later
black and white
generation.
ones.
Yeah, this is
The
much
black
later,
and white. Yeah.
but there's just priceless
Oh
footage
yeah.
of Bunker Hill and of
Yeah.
LA and you know and definitely in some of the early noir films as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Let me just see. I just wanted to say that one of your fellow Soho authors, Naomi Hirahara, uh,
I love Naomi.
I mean, me too. Wonderful, wonderful writer, very cool person. She's watching.
Ah, hi Naomi.
I'm gonna be on are any of y'all, are either one of y'all going to BoucherCon?
I'm
Y'all
not.
BCon?
I wish I was.
I'm gonna be on a panel with Naomi on I think it's Saturday morning.
Is that
So
this weekend?
yeah. So see you soon.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm getting people want to see your cat, Eli.
Of
What is your
course.
what is your cat's name?
This is Binks, and he's a tomcat. He's about 2 years old. So we got old Binks from right up the highway, up a little bit. He had been tied to a tree, and somebody just left him there. Not
Oh,
like hung or anything, just tied up like a leash, to a tree.
really?
So he's all happy now.
Yeah. Let's see. See if we have some questions. Um, yeah, this one's for Scott, which is it's about have any of your books, I mean, obviously Ice Harvest was made into a very successful film. Uh,
Hmm.
uh, has the new book been optioned?
No, it is available. Please, please tell everyone.
Tell your
It
friends.
has not been an option. No.
Yeah. Let's see. What about you, Eli? Have you sold film rights for or TV rights for your books?
We are under negotiations for an option for Don't Know Tough for my debut.
Oh wow, great.
So
Good.
yeah, that's been a whole new bag of worms. And I'll have to,
Yep.
Scott, I'll have to hit you on the side somewhere. But my
Yeah,
whole
do. I've been at it for a long time.
yeah, my whole take, I'm trying to stay away. I'm like, it took me this long to figure out how to write a novel. Like, yeah, I don't, just give me my money and get the hell out of here. Like,
That's one good plan.
yeah, okay, yeah. I'm trying to do a little research because I don't know jack shit about it.
Talk to me later.
Let's see. Well, the usual question. What are you guys both working on now?
Eli, you start.
Yeah, I've got a book coming out August of 2025 called Mississippi Blue 42. And so it's really weird because my first three novels, Don't Know Tough, Ozark Dogs, and Broiler, I had all of those books finished before Don't Know Tough ever came out. Because
Really?
I'd been working on it, like, and I couldn't get in. And so I just kept writing. And so I had drafts of them. I mean, we had to revise. So all this time I've really been working on this one thing, and it's way different than, and I'm excited about how different it is from my like Broiler is a little different what I've done the first two times, and then this thing is much more in the tone of like an Elmore Leonard, Carl Hyacin kind of mix. And anyway, it's about a rookie federal agent um, who her father's a big time college football coach. And of course, she's got she's set on being counterterrorism, joint task force, all this stuff. But she gets stuck on a white collar crime investigation of a huge college football team, like of all the dirty money and all the. And so it takes her about 24 hours to realize that this college football team and all the Southern players involved in it, are way more dangerous than the counter-terrorist stuff that she's got going on. So yeah, it's called Mississippi Blue 42, and it'll actually be the start of at least two books, which will be new for me, two series with the same lead, kind of a
Wow. That sounds great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
man.
How about you, Scott? What are you up to?
Well, I just finished. You know Jed Ayers, don't you?
I've never met him. I know who he is.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
Jed's my screenwriter partner, and he and I have been working for about 2 years on a project that I can't get super specific about, but we wrote it as a book, and we were brought in. We weren't. It wasn't something we started, and they hired us to write a book based on a true story. Well, not based on a true story, a nonfiction book, basically. But it's not a book meant for publication. It is a book meant to be a blueprint for a movie. And so we just finished that, and the director and producer are off making another movie while we speak. So when they're done with that, they're gonna, use our book to nail an actor and nail the rest of the funding for the picture, and then they'll pay us to write the screenplay. So basically, we just finished that. And so I, for the first time in a long time, I still owe Soho a book, so I have to start a book. And right now, I'm not working on anything. I'm I'm just sitting back
Something
for a few
something
weeks.
percolating in the back of your mind.
I
Yeah.
got a lot of things percolating. I want to do a book
Yeah.
set in the music business in the 70s in LA, so it could be kind of almost a follow-up to this one. It's I you know I knew two people who had I've only known two people in my whole life who ever had a hit record. Uh, One was in 1978, the other was the very next year. Both of them hit number one. Both of them were like almost maybe the biggest hit of the year, and maybe one of them was. The first one was "Baby Come Back" by the Baby Come Back, do 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 do. You know that
Right.
one. My cousin's first husband was the bass player on that record and sang and was in the band and everything. And the next one was in 1979, "My Sharona." Um,
The knack.
Yeah, Burton Avere, whose mother was my downstairs neighbor, just a lovely gal and just sweet, sweet person. And Burton was a great guy, and he wrote that riff. I mean, that was his, da 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 da. Anyway, that was it. They, two. I knew two people who ever had a hit record. 1978, 1979, both hit number one, and neither one of them ever had a top 40 hit again. And anyway, so I kind of want, and they're very different. I mean, "Baby Come Back" is this kind of blue-eyed soul, and then "My Sharona."
Who sang that? Who sang Baby Come Back? Do you remember?
Well, his player was the band. I think it was Peter Beckett was the name of the singer.
Okay.
Yeah. Um, and Ron and Peter, my
Player.
cousin's ex-husband, still play together, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
God, have
So,
you read Be Cool by Elmore Leonard?
no, I
It, it
should.
it's in the music. It's a whole set in the music industry in this fictionalized band.
Uh,
So yeah, and it's great. If you've seen the
yeah.
movie's horrible, but the book is great.
Uh, Well, I used to be friends with Barry White's manager, and there was I got a lot of stories. And a friend of mine was a good friend of mine was the biggest concert promoter in France for a long time when I lived over there. So I got to know a lot of music people, and it's a weird world, and it's like it's like the movie business in a lot of ways. And I don't know. I'm thinking about that.
That would be really cool. Yeah. I love all the documentaries that have come out kind of in recent years about, what is it, 20 Feet from Stardom, about
Yeah,
the
yeah,
backup singers and then,
yeah.
the whole Muscle Shoals.
Stand in the
S-
Shadows of Motown.
yeah, I love that
Yeah,
stuff. And
yeah.
then I don't know if you guys happen to see the Bee Gees documentary that came out. It was kind of a sad story, really. And I realize we're digressing, but I like to do that.
Yeah,
Um,
that's good. You want to
but
hear about Simon?
how
We don't have time.
No, we do have
It's the only
time,
time
but
I've ever had a conversation with you where he hasn't come up.
well, I was saving him for last. But the
Okay.
Bee Gees thing, it's a real window into the 70s, and in particular, the whole Miami scene of the whole disco era.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the yacht rock kind of
Yeah.
era in Los Angeles. I approve. I don't know. Maybe you could sell it to Juliet.
Yeah. Well, well, there, I'm under contract already. My editor is Mark Doughton, but I love Juliet. She's wonderful. Um,
Simon.
Simon, yeah, my old we can I was just at that office last week. I just walked by. Saw my old windows and talked to the guy downstairs about whether the old the old landlord was still there. Anyway,
So
I'm
Scott,
sure the
so
people at
just
home
for the people watching, Scott and I have been friends for actually quite a number of years
20,
now.
25 years.
Yeah, 25 years. And
Okay.
very early on, Scott told me about this eccentric character named Simon. And almost every
Simon, if you were watching this, I did not describe you as eccentric.
he's not eccentric.
Well, he is, but I didn't describe him that way.
No, that's my
I didn't use
interpretation.
that word.
So tell the world about Simon.
Simon was my office mate, and he's a great guy, very talented, smart guy. He's British, and I was lucky enough to share an office with him above. If you know Bordner's in LA, it's an old classic bar. It's the bar in the Ed Wood movie. Um, and our office was right above, directly above Bordner's. And he was just this, really fun guy to share an office with. And they had all these, he would just burst in. He was kind of like Kramer and bursting into Seinfeld's apartment, except it was my office and I was writing. And I told him a bunch of times, I said, Simon, you really can't just burst into my office because I'm writing and I'm concentrating and you completely break it up. He says, yes, but I wanted to tell you something, and he was, oh shit. So eventually this is the only Simon story I'm going to tell, but eventually I put a bolt in my door to my side of the office. And I put my headphones on and I wrote all morning, and then it was lunchtime and I thought, all right, I'm going to go out and say hello to Simon, see how he reacted. And I unlatched my door, opened it, went into the ante room, went over to Simon's and looked in and said, hi, Simon. And he looked up at me like this. Just absolutely livid. And I said, look, I guess you noticed the bolt on the door. And well, I've been telling you how it really disrupts my concentration when you just burst in and, interrupt. And he said, well, I've got an idea. What if we put up, like they do in the studios, when it's filming, they put up one of those little revolving red lights. And why don't we put those by each of the doors? And if the revolving red light is on, we don't go in. And I said, yeah, or we could just put bolts on the doors when you don't want somebody to burst in. Anyway, I love Simon. He's a dear friend. And I hope he's not watching and feeling bad because I do love the guy.
No, you definitely immortalized him for sure. Well, anyway, we digress. But it's been
Yes.
such a fun hour talking with you guys. And yeah, for those of you watching, here are the two books, Broiler and The Devil Raises His Own. And I've signed copies of both. Um, and I've been kind of flying solo today, but I'll try to put them in the comments field, the links to the book, so you can just go to poisonpen.com and we would be delighted to sell you signed copies. So anyway, thanks so much, you guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks so much for
Yeah,
having
delightful. Had a good
me.
time.
So nice to meet you, man.
Yeah, you too. You
You guys
too.
will have to connect. I think you probably have a lot in common.
See you down
Yeah.
in Arkansas.